Welcome to Pandora's Awareness Podcast, a place where we collect stories and circulate life-changing wisdom. I'm your host, Asher, and my co-host today is Queen Lav, and our guest today is Pearl. And you're here because we get to talk about failure. Failure. And Pearl, if you don't mind telling us where you're hailing from, what you specialize in, how you add value to the world, and who you've been a hero to.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So my name is Pearl Chiarenza, and I am in Tampa, Florida, right not too far from Lav. We just found out. And I am a mental fitness life coach, author, and speaker, as well as a retreat facilitator. But I am also a amazing wife to my husband of almost 40 years, and I asked him to marry me, by the way. And then I'm also a mom to two amazing sons. One is forever our angel in heaven at 25 years old, and our other son is Nate, and he is going to be 25 next year, but he's getting married October 3rd of this year. So we are
Mm.
gaining daughters in our lives for a change. So it's something new for us. We haven't done that before. So we're really excited about that. And so a little bit about me is I've been through many things, and all of us have been through something in our life, right? But I choose not to let it destroy me or keep me from doing the things that I want to do. So as 2015 arose, I was this amazing, just focusing on life coaching and doing help people with weight loss. And I went to this course. I thought, let me take this identity and destiny course. I think it'd be great for me to help my clients. And as I was doing this, at the end of 6 weeks, we had to give our identity, our I am statement. And so when I gave my I am statement, I was still saying I was all the titles that I was wearing. Like I was still a mom, I was still a wife, I was still this volunteer, all these things that I was wearing. And my friend who I met in the course, she sat across from me. She's like, I'm sorry, but where's Pearl? Did you not sit here for 6 weeks with me? You're supposed to say, who's Pearl? And it was at that time I was like, oh, shoot, like, who the heck am I? Like, what have I done for
Mm.
6 weeks? Right. So I decided that I need to do something about that. So I dropped our oldest son off to college, and my younger son, he's so much like me. He's an go-getter. He'll do things independently. But I realized I kind of took advantage of that and just kind of let him do things on his own. So I decided to take some time to reconnect with him. And as I did that, I then realized it's time to figure out who the heck Pearl was. And I was sharing with you guys before we came on how growing up, I did not like my name. I hated my name. I wanted to change my name, everything about my name, from being called Pearl Harbor, Pearl Bailey, Mini Pearl, like all these things. And so I realized that I had to figure out who I was. So one day I happened to be walking about and I found this rock on the ground. And with this rock on the ground, I decided to pick it up, didn't know why I was picking it up. And so I happened to go to this event and somebody asked me, hey, would you help with this fundraiser? And I was like, oh, I don't know. My hand happened to hit the pocket that I had this rock in. And I was like, okay, God, this rock is here for a reason. So I decided that I was going to say no because we guilt ourselves into saying yes to everything before we show up for ourselves. So I decided
Yeah.
to say no. I felt this rock. I was like, okay. So when I got home, I thought, I got to do something with this rock. So I made a commitment that 3 times a day I would say no to something as happily as I said yes to something. And if I had not done so, I had to call, text, or email somebody to tell them I couldn't do something they asked me to do.
Mm.
It took about 40 days, but as I did this, I found that I became stronger in saying yes to myself and no to others. And as I became stronger, I found out I was happier. I wasn't stressed out because my kid actually make a grilled cheese sandwich last minute, but I became happier in my overall life. And as I became happier, I started becoming more empowered to do things like speak on stages, do a podcast. I have my own podcasts, things like that. And as that happened, I started walking in rooms. People would be like, did you like lose weight, Pearl? Like, what's up with you? Did you cut your hair? Because I had like this, I call it the glow up. I had this radiance about myself. And as that happened, I started truly walking into who I originally was meant to be, this person who can teach others that saying no is as easy as you can say yes. And so I just started walking that original self. So I penned the word Shiro. So, and even men can be Shiro. So it's not a female thing because men can be strong, happy, empowered, radiant, original selves as well. So that's where I am today in my life.
Mm.
I love it. And I love that you shared the story with the saying no. I found myself trying to explain every time after the no. I felt like the duty because it was like I was doing something bad, and I was, oh, but let me explain. I have to do this and this and this. And then one day it just hit me. Wait, why exactly I explain my decision? I'm sorry, I just cannot make it. I'll see you next time. And that was very empowering.
Yeah, I think I'd love to get an audience and say, let's say no as happy as you say yes. And I tell them, I'm giving you $1 million, but you have to say no to get it. And like the audience just like gets so loud because you can say it as happy as you say yes. You just have to step into it. I'm going to fix my camera. Sorry. I'm going to switch cameras.
I could
Something's
I could
happening with my camera today.
I can see your camera is like, we are going to turn our world upside
It really
down.
was trying hard.
Hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
I can see you now.
Yay.
Yay.
Yes, how you structure your emails or your messages with the no? Do you say I'm sorry, for example, or you don't say that? Do you explain why you cannot make it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lab. So I just like to say, like, step into no. One of the things that I did find out because I'm a recovering people pleasing addict. So we want to make the excuses, right? We want to say why we can't help with the dog fundraiser or whatever that is. But we have to stop ourselves from doing that because that's when that guilt, that's when the saboteur and judge shows up in our mind and tells us, oh, you need to tell them why because they're not going to like you or they're going to think you're selfish or all these thoughts that come in. But we have to sage that just by going, yes is a complete sentence, and so is no. So it could just be as simple as, you know what? It's just not something that's my cup of tea. And I will maybe next time if you want to come back to me, right? But it's just you could answer that way. Or the people pleasing me as I started to do this, I found myself referring. So now a lot of my friends call me the connector because maybe Asher would ask me, hey, you want to help me with this dog fundraiser that we're doing for these animals? And I'd be like, oh, Asher, that sounds like an amazing thing. And it's just
Mm.
not for me. But I know somebody who loves dogs and cats, and I think they'd be a great fit. So then I was like, oh, the people pleaser me is like, oh, you're happy because you're helping somewhat. But it was like that connector. So you can become that connecting for somebody, but you can also just say no. It's, you know what, Asher, I love dogs. I have a dog myself at home and just not for me. So it's just like no, because and it's hard. Listen, if you're listening to me, this is not easy. It does not happen overnight. And I still struggle at times. So it's not like it's perfectly done, but you have to show up for you because at the end of the day, if I learned anything with the loss of our son who passed away 2 years ago at 25, I learned that we're not promised tomorrow. Like truly, we talked to our son 20 minutes before he passed, and you are not promised tomorrow. So if you're listening to us, think about this question. If you are not promised tomorrow, and unfortunately, we don't have the pleasure of seeing or hearing you, and all your family and friends could say what they saw you do for yourself, not your titles, not what you did for your job, not how you showed up to volunteer, but what they saw you physically do for self. If each and every person couldn't say something different about that, you need to have a conversation with yourself or grab a coach and let them help you because you want that person. For me, they're going to say they saw me take staycations at the beach. They're going to say they saw me hop on an airplane, go in one day to Vegas and bring back a relative that same day to give her help. They're going to tell you that I sit in my front porch swing and I journal. They're going to tell you things like that. And so they're going to be able to know that I do something for myself. So if you're not at that point, you have to get to that point because if you're working as a professional, when you're not here tomorrow, somebody's going to slide into that desk. So why give them all of you? Give them the part of you you need to commit to, but the other part give back to yourself. And if you're an entrepreneur, you should not be giving all of you to your business all the time because you can't show up for the business the way you want to. You need to make time for self.
Mm. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Pearl. You gave us a lot to think about. And while you was talking, you got me thinking too. So I want to share some stuff that was popping in my head. And just going back to failure, this theme around failure. And you mentioned that what people going to talk about self. And if you think about it, what people often talk about, they talk about your habits. That's what they talk about. They remember your habits. So if you want to remember, people remember your habits. The things that you do consistently, they remember those things. And you got to figure out what those things are and you got to tap into those things. So if you got to share with us some of your major failures, the things that you went to, maybe you don't tell them as failure, but they seem like failure. If you got to share some failure with us, what would that be?
Wow. So some failures, I'll share some personal and I'll share some professional. starting with professional first, is not identifying what I'm spending my money on every week. Like not looking at what I'm putting out for my business versus what's coming in. Because when you look at the hard number and budget, it can open your eyes and it allows you to focus where you need to focus. So if you're not bringing the income in you want to, maybe you're doing too many things outside of your business that's
Mm.
not allowing you to work on your business. It's not allowing you to have conversations with people that might be your ideal client. And so if you are that person like I was, you have to create something that every week you are looking at it. My business coach, Julie, she would be on me. What did you spend this week? Give me your numbers. Like, oh, I have a
Mm.
husband that's an accountant. He'll take care of that. But no, because when he got to it, it's too late. I've already gone past what I need to be looking at. And now it's like playing catch up, right? So that's my biggest mistake, I would say, from a business standpoint. From a personal standpoint, is truly showing up for those that you think you should show up for. And I'll just say it for my mom and my dad, showing up for those people that, they're your parents, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you love them, right? You want to be there for them because for for the most part, you feel like they were there for you growing up. But when you start doing hard work and you start looking at the things in your life that brought you like the trauma and things like that as you grow up, sometimes I feel like my biggest failure is to ignore the trauma I had growing up. So I was allowing myself to show up more than I should have. And the
Mm.
eye opener parts were when I needed them and they couldn't show up for me. I realized that I need to make a change. When I also found out, my oldest son, he was adopted. He was born of our heart. He was mixed race. And unfortunately, my father had become racist to him as my
Mm.
son grew up into a young man. I was the epitome of a daddy's girl. So when I found that out, that disappointment, the for me the failure was I didn't see it, right? I
Mm.
didn't catch the triggers. Maybe I did, but I was sort of ignoring them. And then when it took one of my son's friends to come to me and be like, hey, so for me I felt that was my biggest failure, is to not catch those things as a mama bear.
Mm.
Why didn't I see it? And I realized it was there, but I maybe was ignoring it. And so I think for me personally, failures are showing up for people that, again, going back to saying yes all the time and
Mm.
really not being received the way you would hope it would lovingly be received.
Mm. I
I,
know
I
it's
do want to dig into something uncomfortable, but I know there are a lot of people out there who have this people pleasing trait. So if we can identify it with something in childhood, what that event would be, or what trauma would make us be people pleasers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, when I look back, because I've done this hard work, because realizing that the different things I told you about my dad, my mom, as she got older, just within years, we try to have her come here, move in with us, all kinds of things, big moves, my brother and I. And she wasn't receptive to receiving it. Instead of voicing how she felt, she thought it was okay to call um, services on us. And it was proven that it was wrong, that we were just trying to help her. But those things, it really made me sit back at that time and go, what did I miss? Like, where did it show up at? And going back and looking at my people pleasing trait, like, where was that showing up at? And as I go back, for me, it started, I realized, and it's not my mom, or, I mean, it's not, I say it's not their fault, but it was circumstances beyond their control. My dad did 3 tours in Vietnam. My mom pretty much was a single mom, raising 3 kids and having to work because there was the income you got back then as a soldier just wasn't enough to support all of us. So in third grade, I started watching my brother and sister. I was the oldest. So my brother's 7 years younger than I am. So he was practically a baby. So at that point, I think is when I look back and I've done the hard work, that's when my people pleasing trait showed up, because I was doing this work. I showed up all the time having to do this. And then as I got older, it became even more, because I was always a person who drove my friends wherever they needed to go. You need me to babysit, I probably would have babysat for free for you back then. So those things, because I just did. That's what you're supposed to do, is help others. But when I look back and realize, I probably, as I got older, should have had conversations with my mom saying, I don't feel safe. Because when I look back and I think about the things, I really didn't feel safe as a little girl. Like that little girl, me, when I did my inner work, she was scared. She was scared to use her voice to say, I don't want to do this. It's not, I don't feel safe. But you do what your mom and dad tell you to do, right?
Mm.
That's what we tell ourselves. And again, that's where these childhood things happen. My son has many friends that still come into our home. We treat them like they're our kids from other moms. And we had one of his friends here, and he has a little girl, and she was like 5 years old, and she's in the middle, him and his the mother of his child were in this middle of this custody thing. And the mother stuck an Apple Watch on this 5 year old's arm. She doesn't need an Apple Watch at 5 years old. Every time she was with the dad, the mother was texting or calling that Apple Watch to that little girl. And I watched this little girl in the middle of us celebrating her birthday, the phone rings, and the fear that came across her face. I looked at him and I said, I love you. I pulled him aside away from her and I said, you need to get some cojones, because if you don't do something to change this little girl's life, this is going to traumatize her when she gets in a relationship. She's going to be scared to say something. What those that are listening, if you have littles like that, 3 to 7 years old, what you say, go in the corner. We're us adults are talking. You're basically saying, go in the corner. Your voice doesn't matter. So we have to think about how we speak and talk to our kids, especially this day and age. They're growing up so much faster. They're exposed to so much more because they got these crazy phones and these iPads. I was shocked, you guys. I was in May. I went out to go help my brother and my nephew. My brother was going through some health stuff, so I was watching my nephew, and I was amazed. My nephew and I went out to go have dinner. Every Friday was dinner with Aunt Pearl. We didn't cook at home. We went out for Mexican
Mm.
food. He had his favorite Mexican restaurant. And we would go in there, and I was amazed how many families are sitting there and the kids are on like this. Like there's no conversation happening. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad my kids are growing up. We didn't have that. I mean, they had Game Boys, but they had to leave it in the car. So we're doing more of that instead of opening tables, opening conversations with our kids. And so for me, to circle back around to your question, it truly was like that third grade that's that little child that she was told, you have to take care of you have to take care of your brother and sister. So I was like, I had to take care of people, and I wasn't taking care of me first.
Hmm. I was thinking about your storyline, but this big question that I was asking yesterday of one of my other guests too about how did I get here? Like, how did you get here? And oftentimes when we look back at our journey, we got to think about how did I get here? And what are the things I had to do to get here? And it seems like you got here through some real, real, real challenges. And you
Yep.
find a way to make sense of it. And looking back at it, you can see some stuff. And you mentioned, I wanted to condolence to you about your son, because you said 2 years ago he passed away?
2 years ago, July. Yep. two
Two
years
years,
ago,
and that was
July.
your oldest or your youngest?
That was my oldest. Yep. Matthew was his name. And we literally were on the phone with him just before he passed. And I share with you how he was mixed race. And there were some things that surrounded after his passing that that was trauma too to go through. We heard about it on the news. They didn't come to our doorstep and give us a knock at the door. There was a lot of, unfortunately, my son, we had conversations about, how you are perceived because of your race and stuff. And so we would have conversations about that. And never did I thought in his passing that would be what he would be subjected to as he passed. But, so we're doing this beautiful thing. 2 weeks after, this is why I tell everybody, you have this one life to live. Live it to your ability. Take care of self, because you don't know what tomorrow comes, as we were saying earlier. But within 2 weeks after he passed, we had knocks at the door from friends, because he was in the middle of moving out of our home to moving in with his girlfriend. So he had a friend stop by our doorstep and was looking to talk to Matt. And we had to tell him that Matt wasn't here anymore. He didn't see the news. He didn't have social media. And so we had not one, but probably four other experiences like that over 6 months after he passed. So every July, and it should be every day of your life, but every July we start this movement called Make the Call for Matt, where we want you to call somebody you haven't spoken to in a while. Don't text them, don't email them. Like, pick up the phone and say, hey, Asher, I haven't seen you in a while. How you doing? Hey, Queen Lav, what's happening with you? Like, let's just want to check on you. That's all, because you don't want to be that person that realizes, oh my gosh, I wish I'd have called yesterday. So we do that every July in his honor. And we're really honored because his girlfriend they were probably going to get married. She's become part of our family. So now we have two daughters in our
Mm.
lives. And she has a little girl that she had before she met my son. So we have a little grandbaby too. Evie is her name. So we're really blessed. We look at, of course it's tragic to lose, but we look at things as blessings too.
How did he pass?
He passed in a car accident, single car
Mm.
accident. Yeah.
Mm.
And unfortunately, he made a decision to drink and drive that night. So if
Mhm.
you don't use an Uber, you need to be using Uber or Lyft because, that was a bad decision for him. But,
Mhm.
and you can't change it. Life's not a remote, but I can honor him. The one thing, Asher, is that he saw me step into this Shiro self, as I like to call it. He saw me start putting on my cape first, start doing for me first, because I was at every football game he played in high school. Everything my kids were doing, I was doing a recording, right? And the 2 days before he passed, it was so cool. Him and my husband, we were talking before, they owned this business together. And so they were in a garage working on this business. And he said, "Hey mom, can you throw me a bottle of water?" I'm like, "Sure." So I chucked a bottle of water across the
Mhm.
garage. And all of a sudden he goes, "Wow, not only did you figure out who the heck you were, but you know how to throw something for a change." Because I could never throw a football. So that's just a beautiful memory I have. I feel like it was like something he was giving me, beforehand. And so,
Mhm.
and he was very spiritual. He was very intuitive. Like he used to say to me, "Mom, I'm not going to live past 25." And I'd be like, "Don't put that in the world. I don't want you to
Oh
put that
my
in the world."
God.
And he passed July 25th. He was born July 7th. He passed July 25th. So, I believe he came here. We were honored to raise him for 25 years. We were honored to be picked for his parents. And I just believe he left a stamp on the world, and we're just honoring that memory.
Mhm.
Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story with that. But that was so shocking for me because it's almost like he speak it into existence. Why would he say that?
He had this thing about numbers, and he had this thing about what he had this visions of things he would see. And I'm telling you, they would come to fruition. I mean, he was in Texas. He had gone into recovery. He was in Texas living in sober living. He was doing really well up until just before his accident. And he called me, and then he was in Texas and I'm here in Florida, and he called me. He's like, "Mom," and I was in the middle of going through something with a friend. He's like, "Mom, I just feel like something's not right. I want to call and check on you." And I was like, "How did you know?" Like, so he just had this, some of us just have this light within us that we can just feel and see things. I think he gets a little bit because of our conversations we had from me, because I have stuff, but that's a whole nother show we can do. But so I used to tell him, I was like, "You Queen, don't put that in the world. I don't put that in the world." But he's like, "Mom, I'm not gonna do anything, to do harm myself." He goes, "I don't know. I just have this feeling." And even his girlfriend said the same thing. He used to say, "I don't know how long I'm gonna be here." We'd be like, "Where is that coming from?" Like, so I just honor that he had this journey. And one of the journeys he left behind, we're doing in his honor. So if anybody's listening and wants to be part of it, because he was adopted and because he was the only mixed race child in his adoptive family and his biological family. So talk about traumas and overcoming trauma and wanting to do something. He had a lot of challenges with that. He wanted to do a book because he saw me become this author, right? And he's like, "Let's do a book together, Mom." I'm like, "What do you want to do?" He's like, "Let's do a book on intercultural adoptions, on like how that affects the adoptee, the family, and all of that stuff." So we had already started talking about doing the book, and then unfortunately he passed. So we're moving forward with the book. Right now we have 8 authors that are going to be part of the book. And it's called Beyond Skin Deep Stories of Intercultural Adoptions. And we have
Mhm.
families and adoptees sharing their stories. Some of them are sharing 25 tips on raising a child of a different culture, you know, things like where should you live, what community should you have surrounded around yourself. So things like that. One of the big things Matthew wanted to share in his story was that we were at church one Sunday, and we're at Catholic church, and he's like, "Mom, look around." I'm like, "What am I looking for?" I'm like, "What am I looking for?" And he's like, "Nobody looks like me." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I'm looking, am I going, "Oh my gosh, he's right. There wasn't a lot of, cultures that look like him." I'm like, "Okay, let's do something about that. Let's find a church that, that you feel welcome. Not that he didn't feel welcome, but you feel like, you're in some inclusion." So we'd started that journey with them.
Hmm. By the way, what is your zodiac sign?
What was that?
What is your zodiac sign?
Libra.
Libra. Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. Okay. I'm listening. And
Okay.
I know I'm really am. I'm listening and I'm curious about your son actually. For some reason, it feels like I need to talk about him for some reason. I don't know. But it sounds like he had a real impact on your life and somebody that really made a like put you on a different trajectory. And I'm curious to know what was that pain that you had that you convert to this purpose that you have going on. Like why is this thing that you pursue, what is it about and why it's so important to you?
That's interesting you're saying that because I've been doing some really deep introspection on that question, Asher, just recently. Um, so the night that Matt passed, I actually felt him pass through me. I was sitting on the couch, had moved to a totally, I have my, we all have our spot we sit in our living room, right? I moved to a totally different spot. And my husband looked over because Matt had butt dialed us. And I'm like, we got to figure out where he's at. And my husband's like, we don't even know where he's at. He doesn't share his location. Da 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 da. And so all of a sudden, I just had this feeling come over me and I just started shaking. And my husband's like, what's wrong with you? You're going to have a heart attack. Stop. I'm like, this is not a heart attack. This is something's wrong. Like I felt something wrong. We didn't know till the next morning at 9 o'clock in the morning what had happened because I happened to see it on the news. And so as that was going on, I was like, my husband and my son Nate and we made a commitment to ourselves that we weren't going to hide back our tears. We weren't going to hide our emotions because you can't hold that stuff in, right? So as everybody was coming, I said the same thing. In the middle of us preparing to send Matt off, I'd gotten this phone call. And so I believe in signs. I just believe that there's things for a reason. And I got this phone call from somebody that said, hey, we want to honor you with a day named after you in Syracuse, New York. I live in Tampa, Florida. Like, why Syracuse, New York? Well, my grandfather was from Syracuse, New York. My grandfather was so happy when we adopted Matthew. He was part of our journey to adoption. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go. Like people thought I was crazy. You just lost your son. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm supposed to go. And so over these last 2 years, between doing the thing we do in July with Make the Call for Matt and now the book, I've met a friend who I've known this friend for a while, but she became the certified grief coach and she teaches classes on grief coaching. And I was like, she talked to me about it because I share my story. If you follow me on Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff, I share my story about our journey. And she said, you should become a grief coach. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to live that every day. I don't want to be in people's pain. And so she's just been sort of planting the seed. And so about 2 weekends ago in our monthly grief coach meeting, she came and did a presentation. And after she got done and I sat there because it's just for parents, this grief coach thing, I was like, I went home and I called her. I said, okay, after the first of the year, when I get through my retreat that I do every year in September, let's talk. Because I decided that I know, unfortunately, this is a crazy statistic, but I have 10 people in my circle of friends in this community that have all lost a child to some sort of tragedy around that 25 to 30 age group, whether it's car accident like Matthew, whether it's fentanyl, whether it's suicide, something along those lines.
Mm.
So I decided, I called her and I said, okay, after the first year, I want to do it, but I want to concentrate on moms who have lost a child. That's who I want to work with. She's like, I love Pearl, you're nailing it down. So I feel like, because I feel Matthew all the time. He's come to me in my dreams and I keep saying, what am I supposed to do with this? Besides the book, what am I supposed to do with this? And I feel like, I went from just being a health coach to becoming this life coach to now I feel like this is that journey I'm supposed to go on. And I'm supposed to pour into those moms that are walking this walk and they think that life is not going to go on. They think that I've lost my child, that's the end of my world. And it's really not. We just have to learn that there's the before, there's the after, how them way we can live and move on. Hurt ways to live your life daily, to get up in the morning and recognize, like for me, I have another child. I have an amazing son named Nate who's bought his first house at 23 years old, who is just a great, I call him the old soul. He can have conversations with you about things from long time ago. I'm like, how do you know that information? And he's open. He has different views sometimes on whether it's politics or whether it's whatever's happening in the world, but he's open to conversation. So I have to live my life for me, number one, but also to show up for my kids and to show up for what I love to do. Because if I don't, then I might as well have gone with Matthew. And that's not my journey. I haven't decided. My dash is not decided. Only one person can decide it for me. Whether you believe in higher spirits or whatever that is, for me, God says, this is where I have you. And, that's sort of like I like to share, like when I'm coaching with my clients to say, as you step in this shiro and you become this original self, the original self, if you look back at where you were as a little girl, that's on your journey to where you are today. I wanted to be a teacher growing up. I didn't go to school to be a teacher, but here I am coaching and teaching, right?
Mm.
So I really feel like Your path is already described, it's already laid out, but sometimes we let life's traumas, life challenges, people get in our head and tell us, oh, you shouldn't do that. So what do? We put it on the shelf. We don't do it. And then your kids grow up, they move out of the house, or you retire, like, what did I do all my life? Why didn't I go do that thing? And so I want people to know, do that thing now. If you have to work, work while you do the thing. But whatever it is, you only have this one chance and you don't know when the chance is going to be gone. So stop sitting on the sideline. Stop letting everybody tell you and direct your life because you are the director of your life and you have to make those choices. And so that's why I think the grief coaching is going to come into my world because I want these moms to know when I hear about, these moms who lost a child, everybody brings food, right? Brings all this stuff. I had a friend bring me tons of paper goods. She's like, everybody's going to bring you food, but you need something to eat it on. And so that's what I do now. I took that, I'm like, I'm going to bring paper goods. I'm going to leave a card and I'm going to tell them, these are things that you're going to think. These are things you're going to feel. These are things you're going to hear. All of it is okay. You don't let anything worry you. Whenever everybody goes home, that's when the real work will start. And then that's when I'll be here to sit, hold your hand, cry, scream, whatever it is you need me to do, I'll do with you.
I think you are on purpose, by the way. And here's why I think this. Like I think we all have a built-in system to process the loss of our parents because like the universe designed that way, they're gonna leave us behind. But then on the reverse, I don't think it's the same way for losing a kid. So when you lose your kid, then automatically universe telling you something about that process. So no, I think you're on purpose when it comes to coaching people around that grief because it's not something that we're typically designed to process. Like I know when my parents pass, they gotta I understand the exit, but the early exit for a kid, that one doesn't make sense. Therefore, it's very difficult. So when you talk about your purpose being coaching around that, I think you're on purpose when it comes
Yeah.
to that.
And actually, that's right. Because think about it. We have, when your parents die,
Mm,
we have the words for that, grieving child. When a spouse passes away, widower, right? We don't
mhm,
have a name for it when you lose a child.
mm,
There's nothing like that. There's no title for those, right? Because you don't expect it. It's not something that we think can happen. And there's people out there. I know somebody, and I reach out to her all the time. She's lost not one but two children in less than 5 year time span, and at the hands of other people. And
mm,
she still has three kids at home. That she's so strong. She's so brave, and she's also shows her vulnerability. And that's what I want people to know, that like what you just said, there's no this is not the normal journey, but when it happens to you, your life can still go on. You can still live a life. It's just going to be a little different.
mm.
You said something interesting at the beginning, and I would want for you to share more with us if you will, if you can. You said that in healing your childhood trauma, you divorced your parent. And then you also mentioned the issue you had with your father being racist towards your son. So, how do you balance or handle a situation like this? Because it must be extremely hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's trust me, it's really hard, especially as, let's start with the relationship I had with my dad. I was like, if you could have an example what a little girl was to their dad, that was me. I was a daddy's girl. Like when he came from home from war, he had come home with a mustache. He had to shave the mustache before I would believe it was him. Right. And then I was like, oh, there's my dad, So when that happened, I really sat down. Like when I found out the things he had done, I sat in the person's driveway for over an hour and I just prayed to God. I'm like, tell me what to do. I don't know what to do with this. And first I called my son. I'm like, I am so sorry. And this is how you've raised your kids to be like really forgiving. He's like, Mom, it's not your fault. And it's okay. It's not, it's Papa's issue. It's not our issue. I forgive him, but I don't have to have him in my life. And I'm like, wow. I mean, he was just, a senior in high school, just out of high school, I think, when this happened. And so I just sat there and I literally asked God, what do I do? And literally I did a text message and I basically penned an obituary to him being my father while he's still alive. He's no longer gets the honor of being called my father. And when I look back to when my parents divorced after 43 years of marriage, and when that happened, I was 42 years old when that happened. And I remember going to this little retreat at my church, and we had this private time with Father Bill. And I was telling him what was happening. And he said something pivotal that has stayed in my life. And I tell my kids this. He said, "You don't get to pick your parents." He told me, he goes, "God picks your parents, but this is your game of life." He said, what sport do you like?" I'm like, "I'm a big football fan." He goes, "Okay, you have 53-man roster out there, but they don't have to be on the playing field like everybody else. There's just the 12 men that get on each side of the ball. So if they cannot be one of those 12 people on each side of the ball, they can sit in the bench because these are your rules of life. And they can't play by the rules, you let them sit in the bench. If
Mm.
you want to bring them in to let them try because somebody's gonna open up a spot, you can do that. But if they don't play by your rules, you can put them on the bench." And I was like, that was so pivotal, especially when the stuff came up with my dad. And so, once I wrote that obituary, like I did it so good, you guys. And when I sent it to one of my relatives, they thought my dad had really passed away. I'm like, no, 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 please read it again. I didn't say he's gone, right? And years later, when my son passed away, he reached out somehow or another. He got my number. Like I haven't blocked. Somehow or another, he figured out through somebody else's number to get a hold of me. And the things he said affirmed why I had to divorce him. It reaffirmed my why. With my mom had challenges because at one point during this whole thing with their divorce, I did let my dad come back into my life and he did things. And when I did that, my mother took the stance of, "Well, you should have honored me. I'm in my 40s, you guys. Come on. I'm not a little girl. I shouldn't have to pick sides. And even as a little girl, I shouldn't pick sides." So she's always had this kind of like thing towards me. So when I stepped up because her health was not right, she did these things with unfortunately a relative and just did some things behind the scenes that was going to harm me and harm my family. And I was like, "Nope, I can't do this." So again, I prayed and I said, "What do I have to do over this?" And I said, "I have to divorce my parents." People ask me, they say, "But they're your parents." I'm like, "Okay, let me ask it to you this way. If this was my husband treating me this way, what would you tell me?"
Mm.
And they all said, "You should leave." So why
Mm.
is it so different with my parents? If my parents are narcissists, if they're gaslighting me, doing those things, why is it different? It's not. They can sit in the bench permanently. They don't have the skills anymore to play in my ball game. And you know what? My life is more peaceful. I don't have drama over it. And I go to bed every night with peace. Now, trust me, my son's getting married in October. Do I think, "Oh, yeah, it'd be kind of cool to have them here?" That fleeting moment comes. But then I remind myself, but they haven't earned that right.
Mm.
And it's not my behavior, it's their behavior.
Mm. Pearl,
Wow, that's
you dropped
empowering.
some pearls today.
That's
Talking about
empowering.
talking
Sorry.
about
Thank you.
the oyster and the journey of the pearl. I think we can close with that one, Pearl. We was talking earlier before we get on about the metaphor of the oyster, how it filters water, but then when the sand gets stuck in it and causes immense pain, it creates the pearl, and you get to leave something behind that we get to see as beauty. And if your son was that pearl that got stuck in the oyster of your life, and although that was very painful, you left behind a beautiful story that you get to tell. And I think it really impacted your purpose now because you get to share it and it's beautiful. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you for letting me share.
Yeah. Now, if somebody hear you right now and like, Pearl, you are my hero, and I would love to connect with you, how can they connect with you?
That's so easy. All you have to do is email me info@wsliving.com and I will connect with you. You can find me on social media. I'm on Facebook underneath my name, TikTok, Instagram, all the social media platforms, except I don't do Twitter. I've never gotten into Twitter or
Mhm.
X, whatever it's called now. That's not something I do, but everything else, LinkedIn, just look up my name and reach out to me. I would love to talk to you and give you a free quiz on your that helps you with your mental fitness and see where you're showing up for your life as well.
What is your social media handle?
Pearl Chiarenza, so it's Chiarenza.
Mhm. Okay, I think we can find that. That sounds very unique.
Yes, it's very nice Italian long name.
Nice telling on that. Cool. Okay, Pearl, if you had to wrap up today, out of everything that you've said, share with us, what is your biggest takeaway or giveaway you want to put the bow on and give us the takeaway with us today?
So I would like you to cup your hands together
Mm.
with me. And I would like you to know that this hand is that oyster. It's a little rough on the outside that all that sand's trying to get into. And as it gets into, and you open up your hands with me, you can find your own inner pearl to greatness.
Mm. Beautiful. What about you, Lav?
Beautiful.
What you want to give away or take away?
I got lost in the moment. What was the question?
What is your biggest giveaway or takeaway from this conversation?
I think the biggest takeaway is to focus on yourself. Don't feel guilty to say no, and don't feel guilty to close doors or cut relationships with people who are toxic to your soul,
Mm.
even if they're relatives. Wow, that was so many people. I know so many people who have toxic relationships with their family members, but they just won't push them away because, family, you cannot do that. So, yeah.
I think, Pearl, I think you taught me something about divorce. I was using the word, we all often use the word in one context, but it's really to sever the ties with whoever, right? And it takes a lot of courage to sever the ties with parents that are no longer healthy for you. And for you to share that takes a lot of courage because oftentimes a lot of people will keep that secret because oftentimes a lot of people have story they want to tell, but because it involved their parents and their parents are the culprit, their parents are the villains in certain ways, and they don't want to share it. They're stuck and they can't share it, and they're like carrying this weight and it's weighing them down for so long, but they would love to let that off their chest. And it sounds like you have taken the courage to really like relieve yourself from that weight and be able to speak freely. So that takes a lot of courage. So congratulations to you for leading the way on this one because I think a lot of people have difficulty doing that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. And
Thank you.
final question is, what is that one thing or two thing when people do it drive you crazy? If you got to share with us.
What's the one thing?
Or two thing when people do it drive you crazy.
Two people think that they don't say yes to themselves. It drives me crazy when I hear people just say, well, I have to do it. That just drives me crazy. It's like you don't have to do it.
Mm. All righty. Well, folks, you're tuning to Pandora's Awareness Podcast, a place where we collect stories and circulate life-changing wisdom. And today you heard from Pearl, and she definitely dropped some pearl in our world. So with that, folks, make it an awesome week.